To start this reflection, shake it out a little bit just so you feel like you're standing naturally and you're not putting extra emphasis on anything. So while you're standing naturally, you can close your eyes if it's helpful. We're going to just start to pay attention to what's happening in our body today while we're standing. Starting with the feet. Is the body weight in the toes or is it more in the heels? Just observing and not judging, right? Just paying attention. Also paying attention to whether there's more body weight on one foot rather than the other. Going up a little bit and just feeling if our calves are taking more body weight than our shins, or maybe vice versa, the shins feel overworked. Moving on to our knees. Do our knees feel hip width apart, or do they feel like they're bowing out or maybe collapsing inward? Moving towards the pelvis. Do you feel like your pelvis is anteriorly tilted, or maybe you're too posteriorly tilted and tucking under? Where are your hands? Are they touching your body the same way on both sides, or is one side making more contact with your leg than the other? Or maybe another part of the hand is touching one side of the leg rather than the other. Moving upstream, how do the ribs feel? The spine? Do you have those natural curves in the spine, or do you feel like you might be rotated or overly flexed in one position? Going up to your shoulders, do they feel nice and sitting back, or do the shoulders feel like they're slouched and kind of hunching over? And the neck and the head, does the neck feel nicely sitting on top of the shoulders, or do you feel like you might be a little bit forward and the head is putting more weight on your body? The goal with this reflection is not to change anything, and especially not to judge anything. We're just observing to see how we're standing, maybe before we start an exercise routine or after, to see how things have changed after we did some exercises. Okay, in the wall stand, the way we're going to start this is to stand against the wall, but we want to make sure that the entire back is on the wall. The head, the upper back, the mid back, and the low back. If you feel like there's a space between the wall and your back, I want you to continue to move your feet away from the wall until that becomes easier. There's no reason to force this or to make this uncomfortable. Once the lower body is set up, I want you to bring the shoulders back. So you're going to retract the scapula to bring those shoulder blades against the wall. After that, try to relax the shoulders a little bit and start to breathe. With each exhale, you want to be exhaling into the wall. It's like with each breath, it's like you're melting and pushing closer and closer against the wall. And if at any moment the back starts to peel off the wall, simply take a step or two forward to make it easier, right? This shouldn't be difficult. This should be a 2-minute hold where we can keep a decent amount of contraction in the entire spine and in the shoulder blades. We want to keep a nice and steady breath. And we also don't want this to be super challenging, right? So if it is super challenging, again, I want to re-emphasize, just walk a little bit away from it so you can have a nice, easy breath. You shouldn't feel like you're panicky or this is, the nervous system is starting to freak out here. We got another 20, 30 seconds remaining. And you can almost imagine like you're breathing with the spine and through the spine, right? With each exhale, imagining like that spine is getting that much closer to the wall. We got about 5 to 10 seconds left here. A couple more breaths, and whenever you're ready, you can come out of this position. In this exercise, we're going to work on 3 positions. In the first position, you're going to have the yoga blocks directly above you, and your arms are going to be straight. So you're going to bring the arms, you're going to place the hands on the yoga blocks, and you want to keep those elbows as straight as you can. From there, point your thumbs out and curl the rest of your fingers. You want your big toes touching, so your hips are kind of internally rotated. From there, don't let your neck pop up too much, right? Don't let your shoulders come up too close to your ears. Think about pulling those shoulders back and down, but not too much, just gently enough to avoid your shoulders from shrugging. And we're holding this for another 15 seconds or so, and for a total of a minute. And just breathe, paying attention to whether that elbow wants to start bending, whether those shoulders try to come up towards your neck, and just keeping everything nice, aligned for now. And paying attention to the difficulty level. This first position shouldn't be too crazy challenging. The second position, we're going to make a Y with the yoga blocks. So bring about 45 degrees or so on each side, and then the same thing. Elbows are straight. Place your hands on the yoga blocks and point those thumbs up while the rest of the fingers are curled. You're going to bring the head, the forehead onto the ground, and you're going to pay attention to not allowing those shoulders to shrug up too much. You also want to keep those elbows straight, and most importantly, you want to breathe. Pay attention to whether the breath speeds up, right, and gets a little bit erratic, and you start noticing some stress. I mean, that's good to know. Nothing that you have to do about it, but it just shows you that this position is difficult. And this is a shoulder exercise, kind of. It's a full body exercise, but it just shows you that the weakness might be in the shoulders and not so much the hips. Maintaining that breath, keeping those elbows locked. Shoulders are down and gently coming together as well. And then the last position, the most difficult position, is we're making a T with the yoga blocks in our arms, right? So we want the yoga blocks directly to the side, and we're going to bring those arms, place your hands on the yoga blocks as you did in the other 2 positions. And in this position, I want you to see if you can put a little bit more effort into bringing those scapula together. So squeezing the shoulder blades together and down. Now, if it's hard enough to keep your elbows straight and your arms out to the sides, then don't worry about that cue for now, right? Work that in later as this gets more comfortable. Number 1 priority here is to be able to hold this position while maintaining a gentle breath. And, of course, not allowing those elbows to bend or the shoulders to shrug. So we have a little bit less than 20 seconds left here. Let's see if we can really finish strong. Keep those elbows straight. Pull that scapula together. Pull those shoulders down. And great job. To start this exercise, make sure that the toes are touching each other as well as the heels. From there, we're going to bring our hips into external rotation, into what looks like a butterfly position laying down, and we're going to hang out there. So, a few things to really make sure here in the beginning is to make sure that the pelvis isn't rotating to either direction or tilting or twisting or hiking. And we also want to make sure that both hips are getting an equal amount of range of motion. If it looks like one hip is getting more, I want you to come up a little higher. I want you to come up a little bit higher, reduce the range of motion so you can control and bring more balance to both hips, right? You don't want to get more range of motion in one, you rather just reduce the range of motion in both hips. And if that's you, if you feel like you get a lot more range on one side than the other, today, and maybe the first few times you do this exercise, you're just trying to bring balance. You're just trying to understand and bring body awareness into what does it feel like when both hips are equal. and get the same amount of range of motion. Balance is more important than range of motion, right? So if that's you, again, spend a few weeks, maybe even a month, just trying to learn what balance is in external rotation, because this is a really pivotal discovery for you. Now, if that's not you, if you do feel like you have equal range of motion in both hips, maybe you've done the work already to get balance, then you could just relax and try to let the hips open up, try to get more range of motion, and not worry so much about balance. But you can always check, right? If you are somebody that in the past did have this really obvious compensation, I would just always check in just to make sure you're not getting more range of motion on the side that wants to, or that has in the past. But with that in mind, we're just otherwise relaxing and breathing, letting the hips do their thing here as the upper body stays relaxed as best as possible. Making sure the feet are still touching, right? That the heels are still touching and the toes. And that may take some time, but just practice that and try to bring your awareness there every so often. We have about 10 seconds left here, so take another nice breath, and then you can slowly come out of this position. In the hip focused cat-cow position, our main intention here is to start creating this movement from the hips, and especially starting to get the muscles around the hip to contract. So going into an anterior tilt, we want to generate the movement from the hips, and we want to use the hip flexors, which are the front muscles of the hip located in the hip crease, also a little bit closer to the knee, and you want to feel all those muscles contract as you go into this arched position. And you want to go vertebrae by vertebrae, and you want to do the head and neck last, but at the same time the movement is still being generated from the hips. Now going into posterior tilt, you want to engage the glutes, and you want to get the glutes going and generating the entire movement for you, and slowly rounding each vertebrae until you get to the neck and head. Another important part of this exercise is to make sure that you're feeling both sides of the hips, right? So when we go into this arch position again, we're trying to get the left hip flexor and right hip flexor engaged equally. Now that may not happen at first, but just work on that as a target. And notice how my knees are staying under my hips and my wrists are staying under my shoulders. Do your best to maintain this symmetry throughout the exercise. And as I'm tucking, there may be for some of you, there may be an urge to move the knees forward, to move your body weight back. Again, see if you can maintain that nice steady position with the hips over the knees and the shoulders over the wrists. And a lot of people do this movement, right, in yoga class or wherever, but not with this intention, right? Not with really trying to feel the glutes, not to really trying to feel the hip flexors, and allowing the spine to be a reaction of what's happening at the pelvis, as opposed to everything just kind of moving at once together, right? So when you do this exercise, really think about those two main elements, right? Generating the movement at the pelvis and feeling the glutes and hip flexors on both sides of the hips work equally. So this is a different way for sure to do the cat-cow than you may be used to, and you'll probably see a big difference doing it this way. So enjoy. To start this exercise, let's make sure our feet are hip width apart and pointing straight. We want to curl our fingers and point our thumbs out. That's going to be our hand position on both sides. We can set a timer here, bring our arms out to the side with elbows locked, and we're going to go first into our forward direction here, doing gentle shoulder circles. Keeping the pace moderate, not going too fast, but not going too slow either. And also the range of motion is pretty moderate. We don't want to be too shallow or too wide, right? So we want to keep that circle nice and moderate as well. And from here, make sure the shoulders are pulled back. You're not just hunching over and using your neck. And try to keep those shoulders back throughout the exercise. And many people might be surprised of how challenging this exercise can be. And if our shoulders are super weak, that could definitely affect the way our hips feel. So we're approaching 1 minute in this direction. What we're going to do now is turn our palms over facing the ceiling and going the other direction, right? So we're going to do the same thing. Keep the circles moderate, keep the pace moderate, and just going backwards. Keeping those shoulders back the best we can, so we're not just using our neck here. And this might be getting pretty hard for you, and if it's really, really intense, you could take a break. If not, just smile like I'm doing here and do your best to finish this. And if this is very challenging for you, what does that tell us about your shoulder function and how your shoulders are helping the rest of your body move? So definitely keep working on this and notice how much easier it gets as you get better, but also notice how the rest of your body feels as your shoulders develop better function. And that's a minute. Great job. Make sure your feet are pointing straight and curl your fingers except your thumb, and you're going to place the fingers on the top of your head. And from there you're going to try to touch the elbows while your arms are overhead like I'm demonstrating here. And if you're limiting shoulder mobility and those elbows can't quite touch, that's okay, right? Just make the effort. I'd rather you try to touch them and not touch them without having to compensate your spine and shoulders. So make sure the shoulders stay back and the spine stays neutral, and you're just trying to go through the motion. From the side of you here, you can see that my spine stays neutral, right? I'm not doing anything weird with my spine in order to get my elbows to touch. Whatever range you have, just make sure the rest of the body stays nice and still. And those are the elbow touches. In the wall sit, we're going to get near a wall, and then we're going to scoot down to about 90 degrees. So the knees and hips are about aligned. It's okay if the hips are a little bit higher. And I like to draw a little line where I'm working off of on the wall. So if you can do that, great, try that out. So very important to keep the legs pretty narrow, right? We don't want the knees kind of kicking out and being too wide. Feet are both pointing straight, and the ankles could be a little bit in front of the knees. Now we want most our body weight in the heels, right? The upper body's relaxed, it's not doing too much. You can even kind of just let go of the upper body in this position. And then we just hold and breathe. And paying attention to how difficult it is to be this low, because we don't have to start this low. So I'm scooting up a little bit to demonstrate. If you're good at that low position, stay there. But for future reference, when you do your workouts, if you can't hold it for 2 minutes that low, just scoot up a little bit. It's completely fine. you'll get better at it and you'll be able to move lower. So it's better to be able to hold this position for 2 minutes at a higher position than give up before the 2 because it's a little bit too low for you. So I'm going to come back down and join some of you that are this low. So about 90 degrees, and definitely going to start feeling it here no matter where you are in this position, and should be feeling it mostly in the quads. We got about 10 seconds left, so give us a smile to help that nervous system relax a little bit. And good job. That was 2 minutes. Shake it out a little bit and let's just stand in our standing posture and notice what changed after the workout. Are our hands making contact with our legs differently? Maybe one side was making more contact before, but now it's a little bit more even. Do you feel more balanced on one side of the body than the other? Maybe before one foot was taking more body weight, but now it's a little bit more even. Do the shoulders feel like they're sitting back more? Do you feel less body weight in the heels or the toes now? So just pay attention to how anything you noticed in the initial standing reflection changed after the workout now. And maybe even write it down and pay attention, because this is a great and meaningful observation to find something that changed after a workout. So keep that in mind as you continue your workouts.